Welcome to Retail Retold, the stories behind how that store landed in your neighborhood. I'm Chris Ressa, in conversation with the people and stories shaping retail and real estate. Brought to you by DLC. Welcome to Retail Retold, everyone. Today I am joined by Lindsey Barden. Lindsey is a retail tenant rep in Tennessee. I'm excited for her to be here. Welcome to the show, Lindsey.
Thank you for having me.
So, Lindsey, why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Personally, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I am unapologetically crunchy. I'm an experimental biohacker. But on the business side, I am exclusively a tenant rep in East Tennessee. So I cover everything in the Eastern time zone, which is Knoxville, Chattanooga, the Tri-Cities for retailers.
So, what is the most recent experimental biohack we're doing?
Um, so I started NAD injections, instead of taking like Row Fitness branded, NAD, and I'm liking it. It took a while for it to really kick in, but definitely, on the right track now.
Wow. And the have they like boosted your energy, mental clarity, and all that stuff?
So I do a lot of the crunchy stuff for energy and mental clarity, cleaned up my diet. I do a lot of like MCT oils and creatine for all the brain stuff. I would say the NID or NAD is more for mitochondria repair and gives me a little bit of an energy boost, but not as much as if I'm maintaining a clean diet with some supplements.
Wow. So, what have you noticed from it?
Well, it kind of feels like a clean jolt of energy right after you take it. And my recovery over a longer period of time has gotten better. So I've been on it for probably 90 days at this point. And I didn't really start to see that recovery uptick in between workouts and training sessions until probably 4 or 5 weeks ago.
And what type of working out are we doing?
I'm a like to go powerlifting in the gym, so I like to lift some heavy stuff.
All right. For those who don't know, the powerlifting events are the bench, the squat, and the deadlift. And so you like to power lift. What's your
I
favorite
wouldn't say
lift?
yeah, I don't compete or anything, but that's just how I like to structure my training at the gym.
What's your favorite lift?
Uh, Probably a squat.
So I've done significant powerlifting over the years. On how often do you actually perform a bench, a squat, and a deadlift? Is it once a week for those? Is it once every two and you're supplementing in between? What are you doing?
Uh, Probably just once a week. Um, and I'm not a big bencher. I will say it's more squat and deadlift. I'm weak on a bench. Um, but probably just once a week. So I am lifting heavy 3 to 4 times a week, depending on how my recovery is doing, and then doing a lot of like mobility stuff in between.
Yeah, so I love those movements. I see big changes in my body when I'm regularly doing those movements. However, what I would say is for me, as I got older, heavy deadlift, not squat and bench for me, but heavy deadlifts are super CNS taxing.
Yeah.
And I can't heavy deadlift weekly, even though I have a pretty good deadlift. I can't heavy deadlift weekly. I have to supplement in. If I'm deadlifting heavy weekly, I in about 60 days I will be wrecked.
Yeah.
So I have to if I'm doing it like the max I would do heavy deadlifts is every 2 weeks because my the CNS system. It's not my low back, it's not my hamstrings, it's my CNS system is just it's taxing.
I completely understand. When I was lifting heavy, 15 years ago, it was a completely different game and you could just keep going. And as we're getting older, our recovery is super important. I'm, in infrared saunas and big on red light therapy and anything I can do to shorten my recovery time. I try to do that. So
Do you add any cardio or finishers or anything into the workout?
only right now because I'm getting ready for a ski trip and I like to be a little bit trained up for ski season. But not usually, unless it's just walking. Like I'll walk around the neighborhood or I'll, walk on the treadmill, but I'm not a big cardio
So are you doing
person.
like traditional cardio or are you doing like 7-minute finishers after a workout?
Um, More traditional cardio, like I'll do 20 minutes on the Stairmaster or I'll
Got it.
take a cardio class. I take like a fly dance fitness class, which is an hour long. That gets my heart rate up the whole time. Um, but not
Got it.
really, the
Very
short
cool.
sprint.
Awesome. What got you into powerlifting?
Um, I just gravitated towards lifting heavy things. It's kind of a place where I can forget everything. You've got to think only about your form and lifting that heavy weight at the end of the day, or some people go in the morning. I'm better at the end of the day. So just better
Do
at it, I
you
guess.
do you ever do any of the strongman type stuff like sandbags, stones, farmer's carry, handles, any I have all this stuff in my house, that's why I ask.
Yeah, I will do a farmer's carry just from, biohackers constantly saying like if your grip is not this or if you can't, farmer's carry your weight for this long. So I'll do that as sort of in between some exercises just to
Yeah,
get that
I
heart
I
rate up
end
there.
I ended up getting the Rogue Fitness farmer's carry handles. So I
Oh,
it's not dumbbells, so I, like, put plates on them and I can farmer's carry. I love
yeah.
that, for sure. Um, anyway, alright, enough about weightlifting. My audience doesn't care about weightlifting. Maybe they do now. Uh, I actually I can't get away from that. You ever do any of the Olympic lifts, cleans or snatches?
No, so I have a girlfriend that is big into CrossFit, and she took me to
Yes,
a
sir.
CrossFit class where, that is traditional. But it's too much high intensity interval training for me, because when I do a workout that way, my recovery is so poor and I need so many days before I can go back into the gym and really start to lift heavy again. So I guess
I
if
get
I
it.
was just doing one or two, sure, but I don't traditionally do those types of exercises.
Totally. Alright. So, tell us about you and your work and what you do in your career.
Sure. So, I am 20 years in the business. I started at a big brokerage shop and went to a more boutique firm, smaller regional group, and then opened Dark Horse in 2017 and sort of transitioned from a traditional broker doing landlord and tenant representation to now exclusively doing just tenant representation. So, my clients are typically franchise or corporate retailers that are opening multiple units in the market across East Tennessee, and do a lot of work with gyms and restaurants. Sometimes they're quasi retail users, but just focusing on the tenant rep side.
So and you're in East Tennessee now, but your career, wasn't always in East Tennessee, correct?
Correct. I started in Central Virginia and I covered basically all of the state of Virginia except Northern Virginia.
And
So
and that
from
was with
Virginia Beach.
Rappaport?
Actually, before that, I was with Cushman Wakefield Tallheimer,
Okay,
and
you
then
were
I joined
Tallheimer.
Rappaport. I was their satellite office in Richmond before I started Dark Horse.
And what brought you to Tennessee?
A a different lifestyle than
Okay.
Virginia. My all my family is from Knoxville, Tennessee, so,
Oh,
we had family here, and we're just looking for a different pace of life.
did it feel like starting over for you when you moved?
I thought it was going to, but no. I kind of just transitioned, pretty quickly into East Tennessee. I think, because all of my family has always been in Knoxville, and I've spent so many holidays and trips and SEC football seasons here that it was sort of easy to plug into this market. I felt like I was going to be behind the ball, but quickly just identified gaps that weren't covered by brokers. With retailers I either had relationships with or wanted relationships with, and started my business here. Still finishing up my last couple deals in Virginia because deals take forever. But we'll certainly close that door this year.
And so you started Dark Horse. When you started it, did you have tenants who had already told you that they would use you as a rep in East Tennessee, or were you like you opened the office, you had nothing and you had to go out? How did it work?
So I started the Dark Horse office when I was still in Virginia.
Okay.
And I would say the clients that I had at Cushman that were tenant reps, they followed me to Rappaport, and then same, they followed me from Rappaport to Dark Horse. And then when we moved to Knoxville, most of those tenants, I still did work for them in Virginia and then just picked up new tenants in Tennessee.
Got it. Do you get on the boat in the river and head over to the university's football games?
The Vol Navy, I have
Yeah.
not done Vol Navy yet. I would love to. We've been on, the river a couple times, but not enough.
Okay.
Would love to do it more.
Um, so what are you seeing overall in the retail landscape right now? What are you seeing in Knoxville?
So, as a whole in the retail landscape, you're seeing, I think retailers coming to the table that have sort of ignored some submarkets because they were harder to get into, they were expensive, and trying to step up to the plate and do those deals. Um, and specifically in Knoxville, our vacancy rate is very, very low. And it's hard to do deals here unless you really have that foothold in what's off market, what's coming off market. It's all about an information game here in, East Tennessee. So whether it's Dutch Brothers or Seven Brew from the developer side, or tenants like who I work with, Jersey Mike's and Crunch Fitness. These are deals that we're just inking before they're even hitting the market.
And so the space is moving fast. And are you seeing that retailers have to be super decisive or they're going to lose that opportunity?
They're not only having to be decisive, they're having to compete against other LOIs. In the last probably 6 months, I would say 80 to 90% of the deals that I'm doing, I'm competing against two other users and two other brokers or retailers for that same space. So we're having to pay the rent, really have those conversations up front with the landlord or the listing agent to determine what those deal points are going to be to make both sides happy in order to get the deal.
So this is definitely this is not a real estate phenomenon, and for those in the business long enough, there was a time in when this was the norm, but it hasn't been, call it from that 2009 to 2019 era. And so, how are your retailers reacting to that? How are they responding to that and navigating that, those waters?
Well, I think, part of what's important for, us is to educate the retailers upfront about the market, and helping them understand that corporately, if they have any corporate review process, that needs to be consolidated as much as possible, which they are understanding now. 6, 9 months ago, they heard it, didn't really understand it. Now, they're going through REC more frequently, and just getting through that process, making the decisions quicker, in order to respond to these multiple bid or LOI scenarios in order to get the deal.
That's refreshing to hear. That's good that they're able to move that, because without that, you definitely risk losing the opportunity. Are um and on the landlord side, what are you seeing outside of everyone always sells the we're a great concept. We're going to do great for the property, all the retailers. We're going to bring traffic, whatever it might be. What are you seeing that the landlords, or you're hearing from the landlords, like what's moving the needle to win the deal?
At least here in East Tennessee, the less work and dollars that they have to put into the space. So again, we are sort of under retailed in terms of space itself. So we're going into a lot of second generation space at this point. So those landlords are not wanting to put a ton of TI into the deals, or do a ton of upfit, to get the tenant in. So the tenant that's coming to the table, willing to pay at asking or slightly below, but their deal has a minimal amount of TI is getting the deal done versus someone who's willing to sort of bake in their TI, pay a little bit more in rent, but they want a big TI package, or they want, a long window to get through due diligence and permitting, and which I think tenants should have, but I'm a tenant rep broker.
So I would tell you, yes. So over the course of time, right, that 07, 08, 09, that period to 2019, the cost to install a tenant rose, whether that's from every construction fee, construction costs, municipal costs, all of it. And, one of the things in that retail apocalypse era that we were going through is still always fascinating to me, even when retailers are closing stores and um all that was going on, that the e-commerce narrative, all that's gone. But when it was prevalent, we still leased a ton of space in America. And one of the reasons we did that is the burden of that cost to install the tenant shifted tremendously to the landlord side, essentially eating into the net effective rent of what that deal was. And, I keep saying that this is the year that the rent goes up for uh landlords, but really what I mean is the net effective rent. That could show up in different ways. It might not just be the face rent. It might be that the cost to install the tenant is not changing, but maybe the burden is put on the tenant to do that. So I'm hearing that loud and clear and seeing that as well. I think the other thing that you mentioned for a landlord is one of the things that wins is fast commitment. And you mentioned, like, the more bells and whistles a retailer puts into a deal of contingencies and timelines, and the longer it takes to get to the rent commencement date, and in that time from lease signing to rent commencement date, the longer it takes to get to a deal that is fully committed and doesn't have contingencies anymore, is definitely something landlords are focused on. And I think to any retailer who can, decide to, you know, take on some of that risk where they're prepared to commit sooner, that's going to help win deals, especially when economics are close. I always say speed wins. Or one of the things when, you know, when you have like multiple brands vying for a space, one of the things that wins, economics start to get close. And like the thing that ends up we're seeing that they try to pitch to win the deal is their brand is better than the other brand for the property when economics are close. Now, one way to go about that is we can try to improve the economics, as you said. We'll take it as is or lower TI packages. That's one way. The other the and that could win, but let's assume economics are close. I think the it's hard for a landlord to justify that, like, you know, is the the this Mexican restaurant versus this Greek restaurant, which one's really better for the asset? I could tell you one thing that moves the needle is the one that is willing to sign fastest and get to rent commencement fastest. That moves the needle, uh, sometimes as much as $10 less in TI cost. It could be more than that. And so, um, we're definitely seeing that. And I get from a tenant side, you wanna put all the bells and whistles you possibly can in there, uh, for sure. But, after a period of time, I like to say, like, generally speaking, and it didn't happen overnight, from, call it, 2007 to 2020, the lease form got more tenant friendly over time, right? We started to see more different versions of a co-tenancy. We started to see things that, you know, more tenant favored assignment provisions. We started to see they became market. We started to see more normalized exclusive clauses, and all these things over time, the lease got more tenant friendly. The the tenants who are willing to peel some of those things back and get to what I would call a little bit more balance are definitely going to win more deals for sure.
I completely agree, and I think, the retailers that are doing that and doing their due diligence up front. And I think what's important for a lot of franchisors is to explain that to their franchisees. When I'm working with a new franchisee to a new franchisor brand, um, we try to do everything simultaneously with getting contractors in and understanding, what we're going to have to get approved for permitting. The faster we can do all those things and work through the deal terms and an LOI and then through the lease, we can commit to those timeframes that the landlords want. I also am grateful that permitting isn't COVID time anymore. That really slowed all of us down. Um, we have, and I will say in East Tennessee, some here may feel like it's longer, but I come from Virginia where it's extremely long and it's still a long process, with a lot of oversight and a lot of review where that portion has shrunk. And I think everyone can get on the same page. I try to educate my retailers that, this is a marriage that you're signing into. You want a good relationship with your landlord. And if you can meet them in the middle on some of those terms when it comes to co-tenancy and exclusive language, I mean, they want you to succeed just as much as you want to succeed in most cases. So it's not necessarily just about rent. If they're a good landlord and, have a good asset, they're wanting you to last a long time through the life of your term.
For sure. It's a great point. The permits, fascinating. There are some markets that are strong markets that some retailers have said mercy on and just paused expansion in that market because, you know, it impacts, like, I don't know when I have to go and hire somebody. I don't know when I can start buying marketing, like, because I never know when I'm going to open the store.
Yeah, and I've heard that over and over again from different brokers in different markets. And I've looked at personally some investment projects across the country, and that's always a hurdle for me as a broker. Looking at, okay, if we're going to reposition this asset, what the permitting process is going to look like, how much time are we going to need before we get our first check, honestly, on the investment.
Yep. Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Um, what um what else haven't we talked about that you're seeing as far as in the market that you think is important?
Oh, that I think it's important.
Yeah.
Um,
Or is interesting
I
to you, even if it's not important?
what I am interested by how many like concepts are coming into the same market and competing against each other. I'm interested to see in, 3 years who's still here when it comes to all of the coffee guys, all of the chicken guys, all of the, when it comes to those retailers as a tenant rep who lives in a market where we're doing second gen off market deals, I'm always thinking about who's going to last and what that's going to be repositioned as, especially when it's a ground up development on a site that's, a quarter of an acre or something that's very small and unique, how that's going to be repositioned if it doesn't last. So I'm seeing all of these concepts. We've all seen the shrinkage of retailers' size models. So I just find it interesting to see everyone coming into the same markets and competing against each other. Who is going to last?
It's an interesting point. Um, when I think about that, the the I'm always brought back to for our space. I'm brought back to the gym industry. And I talked about this recently. And so on a podcast. So in the 80s, about 5% of Americans had a gym membership.
Oh, wow.
So when gyms would open, it was a very big zero-sum game. They would open up and they would end up stealing from someone else because there was no one was marketing to the uh, anyone else except for the current gym goer. And then along comes Planet Fitness, and Planet Fitness says, "Well, this is interesting and a little silly. Why don't we go after the 95%?" And they go after the 95%, and they did that by price point, cheap price point, the no intimidating to get people who aren't gym goers to go to the gym. They had Pizza Fridays and Bagel Tuesdays at some places to get people to sign up for the gym. And gym memberships grew and they grew. And it wasn't from taking from the existing gym membership. There was additional market share that wasn't being tapped. And today we're still, right? There's a lot of different people always talk about to me like the gyms are a good one. There's a lot of different gym concepts out there, high intensity training, powerlifting, the box global gyms, yoga, Pilates.
Right.
I think today we're only at like 25 or 30% of Americans have a gym membership.
Wow.
And so when I hear like when someone goes, "Oh, another gym," I go, there's a lot of opportunity out there still. And so when I think about like new concepts competing, I'm often brought back like, is it a scenario like you mentioned chicken or coffee? Is it a scenario like it is for it was for the gyms of the world. And if it is, there's more market share to be had. And, um, and obviously the table stakes have to be met, right? Like if you have a restaurant, like good food and good service, like that's just the table stakes. Like that's to get in the game. Like that doesn't guarantee you're going to be successful. There's a lot of other things that come to the table. But if you've met the table stakes, you know, there still could be, depending on what industry we're talking about, an opportunity, but for market share, and maybe you just have to look at it a different way, like Planet Fitness did, unlike the gym goers. Because the theory was at the time in like the 80s that 95% was never going to join a gym. They weren't going to spend the money. It was a luxury. We weren't going to do that.
Right.
And how the world has shifted. And today we think, oh my God, there's all these new gym concepts. And yet we still have a lot of room to get new gym memberships out there. So I wonder, right? And then I look at like with like a lot of people are talking about coffee. I recently did a LinkedIn post which was, I don't think we're in a coffee war. I think we are in a beverage war. Because if you look at like Seven Brew and you look at Dutch Bros, well, significant amount of their business is energy drinks.
Right.
Right? It's not they sell a lot of coffee, but significant amount is energy drinks. So now we're in a new product, right? Starbucks doesn't sell those, Dunkin' doesn't sell those. Additionally, those brands have tapped, much like the gyms, like Planet did, they have tapped a consumer that wasn't thought of to be a coffee drinker. They skew much younger, right? High school kids are more apt to be in line at the Seven Brew drive-through than they might be at Starbucks. And I think those brands have tapped into a different type of consumer experience. They're in the convenience space, right? In and out, drive-through only, very much convenience, get your beverage and go. Starbucks is in this, they want you to show up to the shop, set up your computer, work there all day business, have 6 coffees, because that's what I'll do when I go to Starbucks throughout the day,
Same. Same.
right? And that's a totally they're both selling coffee, but are they really selling the same thing? And so, um, and I try to stay away from the Dunkin' drive-through because if I go to Dunkin', it's hard to not get a chocolate frosted donut, which I don't think either of those brands have. And so I think there's obviously competition and they're all in the stomach share business or throat share business, but for beverages. But I think there's oftentimes more opportunity than we give the credit to the market for having. Um, I get more concerned on fad trends than I do different businesses. So what I mean by that is, right, I think coffee and chicken are here to stay, right? There'll be some winners and losers. But we had the froyo craze in the mid 2000s where there was a
Right.
froyo shop in every place. And that whole industry created. I don't think the coffee industry is going anywhere. I don't think the chicken industry is going anywhere. There will be winners and losers. So those are less concerning to me, that space. More concerning is when hot new trend comes on and we'll forget about, is my tenant going to be successful, but is this trend industry long lasting and durable? That's where that's where my brain goes on that. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
No, absolutely, and I agree with that. I could probably keep one of the coffee guys in business as much coffee as I drank. So I'm certainly not anti-coffee, and I think it's gonna be, in my opinion, what brand evolves as, the honestly, the trends come up. Is it protein coffees that get added to the menus? And is it for us, crunchy biohackers? Are we getting supplements added into our, energy drinks through Seven Brew or whatever it may be? Evolving the trends for each one of those concepts, and obviously the ones that don't evolve will fall out. We've seen that over and over again on full service restaurant groups that just didn't evolve well. And then they end up having these boxes everywhere that are 5, 6,000 square feet, um, that are old, tired concepts.
Yeah, like, for sure. Like, one of the ones in the, 2010 to 2020 era, I was cautiously optimistic about was what I would call the trampoline park craze that grew, right? That was like a new trend.
Right.
Um, and, you know, that's actually given me more comfort in the pickleball arena. Um, because that was a highly successful. It's done really well. And what I learned is it really wasn't about the trampoline. What the market was missing, and there was a huge opportunity, was for kids recreation and entertainment. And I have a 7 and 8-year-old, and I can attest I've been to way too many trampoline parks and kids entertainment venues, especially here in the Northeast where, for the last 2 weeks, it's literally 36 degrees today, and
Ooh,
I'm not wearing a jacket because it feels like it's summer to me right now because it's been 0, feels like -9, 5, feels like -5, for the last 3 weeks straight. Brutal
wow,
cold,
I
and
can
it's
imagine.
36 today, and I'm like, it's like summer. It feels like summer. It's insane. So, um, to that end, uh, I grew and I got, ended up these businesses were highly successful, um, and but cautiously optimistic because new trend comes, and when someone starts to make a couple bucks, then capital follows and people start growing it. Um, but that proved to be right, versus, maybe we did too much froyo in the mid 2000s and that was a trend that didn't last.
Yeah, and I think, when we're talking about those concepts like froyo, I mean, they weren't adding anything to their menus where, these trampoline parks and these entertainment concepts are always adding another component to their business model. And I think, evolving that way is going to sustain those concepts long term.
For sure. So, appreciate the insight and color on the state of the market, what you're seeing, your thoughts on the market. One of the things we always talk about is on this show is a deal or a story that of a deal that was um, interesting. And you recently had a anchor store lease get signed in 2 weeks. I fell off my chair. And so please walk me through how this started, what happened along the way, and how it got done. It might not be a long story since the deal only took 2 weeks, but
Sure.
please
So,
share the secrets that the
uh,
world needs to know to get deals
yeah,
done in 2 weeks.
no secrets in the broker here. It was a retailer that really wanted a deal and a landlord who set a timeline and was open to making the effort to make it happen. It was Crunch Fitness, and we were on a market tour. It wasn't even honestly a site that was on the market tour. We had some extra time. Anytime I have some extra time, I'm constantly driving my clients around the market so they can see what's changing. We went into a center that had a deal in play already, and they fell in love with this space plus some additional square footage. I went knocking on the door of the landlord and said, "How do I get this deal?" And we had a timeline to capture the deal and get it finished, and it's 2.5 weeks. And that retailer crunch, made the decision that we want this deal bad enough that we will do whatever it takes. We will get all of the approval process. We will get, everybody to, make the decisions quickly. And we brought in, the architect and the contractors, flew everybody in. Half of the team was out of the country, so people were reviewing leases on the opposite 12 hours, lease documents, and we inevitably got the deal done. But it was two parties that really wanted
Yeah,
to make the deal work.
yeah, so, I get the point. You've hit home that you need 2 motivated parties, so
Yes,
that right? It doesn't work without 2 motivated parties. I get that.
100%.
You've hit you've hit home on that piece. So just to back up, you have this site that's not on the tour.
Right.
You get to the site, and what happens next? The crunch says, "This one's on the tour, but I like this one the best." What how did it come that that was one they wanted to chase?
So there was an opportunity, but it just didn't make sense because it was two levels, and we weren't initially thinking out of the box enough about could we blow through the space and put a stairwell to capture the amount of square footage that we needed. There were some parking challenges in front of the space on one level, which sort of hindered how we could create an entrance. So we just really had to think out of the box to get a position in that submarket. And this was certainly something that comes around very rarely. We were going to have to think out of the box and not do our prototypical format. So
I
it's two
love
levels.
non-prototypical.
Yeah, it's
So,
two
so
levels.
it's
It's got a staircase. It took some brain damage, but they were
so
willing.
so did you know there was a deal on the space before you reached out to the landlord?
I had an inclination that they were working other deals. Just, I'm constantly checking on where things stand on any open box, any vacancy. Do you have deals working? Does this have an LOI? So I knew that they had been working on something, for several months. I didn't know how far along it was, and if they were at least signed, but they were pretty far along. And in order for them to walk away from something, they were going to have to, um, you know, meet that time of 2 weeks.
I imagine, right, economics matter in that, but I imagine they liked crunch better than the deal they were working, because that's a dramatic move. They had been working months on this deal. Crunch comes in, goes, "Don't sign that. I'm here to play. I will move fast. I'm gonna get creative. I'm going to we're gonna be out of the country, and I'm gonna be working on the lease on in different time zones." That's compelling, but you still have to, at that point, you're like, wow, I need to be working. I need to really like crunch compared to the previous, the deal that I'm working on. So they obviously did.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
and then did you even go to an LOI, or did you go right to lease?
No, I mean, we had an email instead of an LOI that basically
Yeah,
structured basic terms. Let's move to a lease. If we're all in agreement on, the major deal points, let's just push forward and see if we can make this happen. So yeah, we
and
skipped the LOI.
yeah, I imagine you did skip the LOI, because that would have been an LOI could take 60 days. So let alone
At a
right,
minimum, yeah, at a minimum.
right. And um, was this like a large landlord, a local landlord? What type of landlord?
Um, they are local. They have, a couple assets, probably more than a couple assets, but
Okay.
they
But
were
they're a
willing to.
local
They have a
sophisticated
bunch of
enough landlord.
stuff in Knoxville. Hmm.
Got it. Um, so how long ago did this get inked?
The end of last year. So,
Wow.
well, I guess probably third, fourth quarter,
So I
20.
imagine they're trying to open for New Year's resolutions in 27, so get open the end of this year. Is that right?
Yeah, hopefully they're open before that. They've got
Oh yeah.
signage up already, and
Oh my
we're
goodness.
pushing forward. Like no time is better than now.
Wow. Two motivated parties, everybody. When you have two motivated parties, you can make anything happen.
That's
Well,
right.
I appreciate the story about Crunch in Knoxville. Thanks for sharing your insights. Um, if you're a retailer out there, how can or a landlord, how can people find Lindsay?
You can find me anywhere on the socials at Dark Horse CRE is my handle. That's my website as well. LinkedIn, Lindsey Barden. Amazing. Everything is Dark Horse CRE.
You know you're going to get a lot of reach outs because you just gave everyone hope that a lease doesn't have to take a year.
Well, if you're motivated, we can absolutely make it happen, but you have to be motivated
Uh,
for sure.
um, Great. Well, Lindsay, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe. See you in the next one.